Good evening. It's Sunday evening, time for Old Testament studies here. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 18 tonight. I guess that means we've been studying in Samuel for 18 weeks now. Fairly short chapter. Let's see what we got here. We got 30 verses. We continue the saga following the life of David now. David's still fairly young, and Saul's taking him into his house, but Saul's starting to have regrets now. In fact, this chapter is the final complete falling out of David and Saul, but Saul's subtle, like the devil. Remember that subtle serpent? He tries to kill him tonight with a javelin, then he tries to do it like a murderer would today, I guess. Maybe if I can get somebody else to do it, or they don't know that I'm really behind it, kind of thing. Chapter 18, verse 1 says, and it came to pass. You ever notice how many verses in the Bible begin with, and it came to pass? It always reminds me of that story I heard once where a preacher was asking his people, said, what's your favorite Bible verse? And somebody said John 3:16, and another one quoted this verse, and another one quoted that verse. And he gets down to one little lady, and she says, my favorite verse is, it came to pass. He said, that's your favorite Bible verse? It came to pass? And she said, yep, a lot of times when things ain't going good, I say, praise God, it didn't come to stay, it come to pass. So there's a lot of hope in that verse too. It came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Saul and David was having a conference here, and Saul's son Jonathan's in, and the soul of David was knit with the soul of David. They became great friends, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, took David, and he wouldn't let him go no more to his father's house. You come and stay here now, David. You're part of my entourage. And then Jonathan and David, I take it was living in the same place at that time, they made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. They were great friends. Now there's a lot in verse 4. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and he gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and his bow, and his girdle. And I think what you see here is a symbolic thing that it was literal, but Jonathan was also doing it as a symbolic acknowledgement that, hey, David, I was the one in line for Dad's throne, but I see the hand of God upon you, and I'm taking off my royal garments, and I'm giving them to you. He recognized that. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and David behaved himself wisely. He conducted himself the way he should. And Saul set him over the men of war. You want to make him general. And he was accepted in the sight of all the people. Everybody liked David, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, he'd been out to war, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel. And this was a custom, a tradition back in that day when a victorious army was returning. They'd go out and meet them. The women would be singing and dancing and music and everything. It was a celebration of the victory. They went out singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets and with joy. I think that would say with tambourines and with joy and with instruments of music. So the women were singing and they were dancing. They were beating the tambourines. They were spinning around, and they were singing in the parts. Like the women answered one another as they played. They had two different parts. And one of them would say, Saul slain his thousands. And the other ones would say, and David his 10,000s. And that made old Saul jealous. He was very wroth, angry, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they've ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? He thinks he's king. And Saul eyed David. He kept an eye on him from that day forward. And it came to pass on the morrow that evil spirit from God came upon Saul. Remember, we've dealt with this. He's got trouble with the spirit that comes upon him, and he calls for David to come, and that's how this started. Remember, David's playing his harp, and the evil spirit flees from Saul. And he prophesied in the midst of the house, and David played with his hand, as at other times, But this time old Saul was sitting there, and he is upset, and he is under the oppression of that old evil spirit, and he's got his javelin in his hand. And David's over there just playing his harp, trying to get the evil spirit to flee out of Saul. And Saul cast the javelin, and he said, I'll smite David. I'm going to nail David to the wall with this. He tried to kill him. I'll smite David to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. I don't know if that means Saul jumped up when he missed him, pulled it out of the wall and threw it at him again, but David got out of there. Twice he escaped. And Saul was afraid of David. And that's interesting to me. Saul's the one with all the power. Saul is the king. But he realizes that the Spirit of the Lord has left him, and David's God's man, and that scares old King Saul. The devil's afraid of the Lord. Don't forget that. It ain't the other way around. Resist him, and he'll flee from you. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, and he had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed David from him and made him his captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. David did. And David behaved himself wisely. That's important. He's always doing the right thing here. Now, this don't happen for the rest of David's life, but right now at this point in his life, he's conducting himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. He said it twice. He said, Saul's afraid of David. But all Israel and Judah, they loved David, because he went out and came in before them. Everybody knew him. He was famous. They loved David. And Saul said to David, now this takes us back to the story of the Philistine giant Goliath. Remember, whoever kills him will get to marry the king's daughter. Well, that ain't happened yet. David killed him, but now Saul's going to have to keep his promise here, but let's see how he does it. Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her I will give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me. You be brave. You be courageous out there fighting. And fight the Lord's battles. Now, he's a hypocrite. He's really trying to get David killed. For Saul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. I'm going to get rid of him, but I ain't going to kill him. I'm going to send him into battle and tell him to behave wisely or courageously and everything. I'll get him killed in battle. And David said to Saul, Who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? I'm going to get to marry your daughter? And it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David. She's done been promised to him, but the time comes and she ends up being given to somebody else. She's given to Adriel, the Mahalathite, to wife. Now, Saul had another daughter, though, a younger daughter. That was his firstborn, Merab. He had one named Michal. And Michal, Saul's daughter, she loved David. And now we're going to find out in this story, this sounds good so far. It sounds like it's going to be a love story, but it don't have a happy ending. They have a terrible, terrible marriage here. And I think if you read the story, I think what old Michal loved was the image of David. She didn't really know David at this point. She just knew the songs about him and all this. So Michal, Saul's David, she loved David. She had a lot of her daddy in her, we'll find out. And they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I'll give him her, that she may be a snare unto him. It sounded like he didn't think too highly of his daughter. I'll fix him. I'll give him that Michal, that the hand of the Philistines will be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law. And one of the twain, one of them two girls, you'll not get to marry Merab, like I said, but you can marry Michal. And Saul commanded his servants, saying, You go and talk to David, commune with him secretly, and say, Behold, the king has delight in thee, and all his servants love you. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servants, they went and spoke those words in the ears of David, and David thought about it, and he said, Does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I'm just a poor man? I'm just a shepherd. I'm just a young shepherd. in society's eyes, I'm not the same class. I'm lightly esteemed. And the servants of Saul told him, saying, on this manner spake. They went back and told Saul what David said. And Saul said, verse 25, thus shall you say to David, you go back and tell him that the king desireth not any dowry. You don't have to bring dowry fit for the king said, don't worry about the dowry, but just a little bit of dowry, which is really a lot of dowry. He said, I want you to bring, you're a soldier, David, now, and said, you're leading my armies out there, and said, if you want to bring a dowry, here's what I'm going to, it's not silver or gold, but I want you to bring 100 foreskins of them Philistines. See, that means they had killed them. The Indians, some of them in North America, they'd take scalps to show that they'd killed somebody, and other societies have cut off ears to show that they've killed somebody. And the Jewish, they'd cut off foreskins for the trophies. To bring me 100 of them. I want you to kill 100 of them, bring their foreskins as a dowry that you can marry my daughter, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make, here's what was really behind it at the bottom of verse 25. Here's what that's what Saul said, but what Saul was thinking is in the bottom of the verse. Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. I'll send him out there on this mission. I'll get him killed, and we won't have to fool with him no more. I've decided I don't like him when they sung about him killing 10,000s and me just thousands. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. He said, I can do that. And the days were not expired, and wherefore David arose and went, he and his men. And they killed of the Philistines 200 men. He only asked him for 100. And David brought therefore 200 foreskins back, and they gave them in full tale or full count, full tally to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal his daughter to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David. Now that's important. That's why he's afraid of him, because Saul sees and knows that the Lord's with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David. He realized they were on different sides. And Saul became David's enemy continually from now on. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul. So his name was much set by. Everybody, the name of David was important. Everybody knew that. I hope that your name is much set by too. And remember, there is a name that's above every name, the name of Jesus. See you next time.